taking my Super Duke GT in for a service at Gear 4 over in Deepin near Peterborough. And I've got a loan bike booked, so I thought I'd do a little review, just do impressions of whatever they give me. No idea what I'm going to get yet, but we shall see in a minute.
It's the bare-faced biker.
We have a KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, while my GT is in. Quite a nice looking bike, a little bit taller at the front than my GT. Big frontal area, looks like good wind protection around your legs, and quite a high screen as standard as well. Adjustable one-handed with the knobs there. So actually probably about the same seat height as the GT. And of course this one has got the spanking new big screen. If I can turn it on, this one's keyless. So the feet are quite a bit more forward. I guess as this one is designed to be used off-road as well, for standing up on the pegs, so it's quite a different riding position to the GT. My arms are higher, further back, say to aid standing up I guess. And the pegs are quite a bit further forward, so it's probably more of a GS style riding position rather than that sort of sports touring. Feels like it's perhaps got a slightly heavier flywheel than the GT. It's got more of a sort of boxer characteristic. In terms of the way it revs. Yeah, that's definitely more tuned for being able to stand up. But you sort of notice that in the gear lever being a bit forward, your legs being a bit higher and further forward on these pegs. So it doesn't seem to have a quick shifter, which I was just going for there. But it feels like the same sort of power as you would expect. But if anything, just a little bit smoother. That might be because it's a couple of years newer than my GT. Feels a little bit more stable as well, I would say. I don't know whether that's the steering damping, it looks kind of damper down there. Whether it's just the steering head angle perhaps. So pretty easy to adjust the screen on the move. Pretty decent wind protection. This is quite similar to the higher screen that I've put on the GT actually, but from stock, so that's pretty good. Handling wise, it is very similar to the GT, the way it tips in. It's just got that slightly different rev characteristic. as I say, I would guess that's the bigger, perhaps a slightly bigger flywheel, perhaps. But it almost smooths it out a little bit, unless they've changed the fueling slightly on this. Or just with it being a bit newer, perhaps. It's certainly a little bit more leisurely, I would say. Good for touring. Engine's still the same. Still powerful. Still nice and stable. Or immediately missing the quick shifter. So I got it in street mode and street damping, which I certainly find on the GT are the best settings for just bumbling around. I find in the comfort setting on the suspension, it's probably good if you're going along on the motorway and not really hitting lots of bumps. It kind of floats a little bit more. But if you get on a bumpy road, then I suspect the damping's not high enough, and you're still bouncing off the previous bump when you hit the next one, and it all gets a bit out of sorts. But in street, that tends to sort it out a bit. So I'll just put that in the same mode for this. And the ride in street just gives you a sort of middle of the road throttle response. Whereas if you put it on sport, then it's very sharp, which is good if you're on twisty roads, but not really what you want for just pooping around. So the screen's very clear, as you can probably see, and all your settings are in here. Ride mode, your traction control and your ABS you can switch independently, your damping, and you can change whether it's set for rider plus luggage. I guess that's this little symbol down here where you can see it's just rider at the moment. Damping, as I said, sport, street, comfort. Ride modes, I think rain cuts the power, sport just sharpens up the throttle. I think sport and street have just got full power still. Not sure about off-road, probably automatically changes the traction control settings and that sort of thing. So traction control on off, ABS, off-road, or on-road or off. So we'll just leave all that alone, I think. And you can set various quick selectors and things on the main, or how your main screen looks. Just see if this has got quick shifter that's just disabled. It doesn't. Heated seats, shift light language units if you're touring abroad. And I think the big improvement that I would be keen to have on my GT. Can't get it in neutral. No. No, we'll leave it in first then. No, good luck finding neutral. the thing that I would be keen to have on my GT is this cruise control that they've moved over to the left, like the BMW system now. The GT that I've got from a couple of years ago has got the cruise control on the right, which is pretty awkward because with these big V-twins, if you roll off ever so slightly, you've lost 10 miles an hour in a second. By the time it's taken you to switch the cruise control on, you're not at the speed you wanted to set it at, and then you have to fiddle around putting it back up. You can do it if you're very careful with your throttle. You can flick it on, but it's awkward, and that's all easily fixed with just moving it over to the left here. So a bit of a no-brainer really. Not quite sure why some manufacturers put it on the right. Doesn't make any sense to me. So I do quite like this riding position. It's a bit upright for me. I do find my back hurts on long stretches when I'm too upright, but I know it suits many people, and the sales of the bikes like this, like the GS, speak for themselves really. But this all feels fairly smooth. I don't know whether it is a larger flywheel. I'd be interested to know really. So we've got a power socket there just at the back, quite handy if you put it on your own sat nav, although I do see you can connect up your phone and navigation to this. Not quite sure how much mapping it gives you on the screen, or it's all got Bluetooth there as well. But the screen is lovely and clear, as you can see, even in this bright sunlight I can see it clear as anything. I would say it's quite a bit smoother through the 30 limits, holding a constant speed than the GT. As I say, that might be just because it's a bit newer, better fuelling. Could be because of having a bigger flywheel, I'm really not sure. I've gone the wrong way. Good in a tight turning circle, no problem there. Really easily and nicely balanced. We'll just go down a B road here and see what it's like on a bit of rougher tarmac. It's not bad at all. I'd say it's a little bit more compliant than the GT. Not quite so harsh. I guess that's perhaps tuned with slightly less travel, or tuned for a bit sportier riding. This is a little bit comfier, I must say. So that's on the standard street mode. Perhaps do. Wrong menu. Let's put the damping in comfort, and as I say, that tends to be a bit too bouncy on the GT, but we'll see the suspension here what the difference is. Slow speed handling, really easy, just nicely balanced. Different feel to it than a GS. Obviously you've got a V-twin in here, so the weight's a bit higher, but no harder really to bumble around at low speed. Oh, with that comfort, that's really quite nice. And it's not getting out of sorts like the GT does over the bumps. That's really very good. Turns in really nicely. Almost turned in too much there. Doesn't feel less sporty than the GT, if I'm honest. It's just, I don't know, it's just a different riding position and a little bit less keen, but there's a big upside to that in it being quite a bit smoother. And the suspension on this is definitely better for the road, I would say. Perhaps the GT, you know, you're going to notice and appreciate it if you're doing track days and things like that, but I think in the real world for touring, it's probably why most people, or a lot of people, go for this. So the arms are a bit higher, my back's a bit straighter, a bit more upright, feet a little bit further forward. Throttle response is definitely sweeter. Turning's just as good, really. And suspension is better. Not getting any buffeting off this screen. It's a little bit noisy. Let's move it down a bit. See if that gives me cleaner air. Not really. Just gets louder. But it's not turbulent. It's going quite nicely around my body. Getting a little bit on the top of my legs, but nothing dramatic. Pretty comfy on a warm day like this. Really nice and solid and stable. Just bubbling around like this, it's comfy as anything really, suspension wise, and I'm not feeling any of the bumps of the road. But when you do tip it in and turn in, I'd say it's difficult to tell on a dry day like this. There's loads of grip, but I've got a fair bit of feel from the tyres. I wouldn't say it's sacrificing anything in that regard. These are pretty bumpy curves that do affect my GT quite a bit, and there was none of that round there with this. I get a kind of wobble on the GT as I go around those corners over some of the bumps that you hit part way round, but didn't seem to phase this at all. Yeah, it tips in really nice, no problem. Quite a bit smoother in second and third. I'm comparing, of course, to a 2017 Super Duke GT, so that's not to say that the new one isn't exactly the same as this. I don't know. I've not ridden the latest one, but yeah, really good. Nice light levers, or light clutch rather. I assume you can get a quick shifter on this. I'd definitely want that, you miss it straight away. Especially on the KTMs, the quick shifters, unlike some bikes, seem to work pretty well sort of mid-rev range as well as at the higher revs. So some bikes, unless you're on full power, they're not really very smooth. Whereas the one on the GT that I've got even works when you're pootling around fairly leisurely. You have to be firm with your change, but as long as you are, it's pretty smooth. Ready to race. So, having stood back and had a look at this, I think the it's possible the extra stability is coming from the 19-inch front wheel, perhaps, and the sweetness of it tipping in could also be from the fact it's got a 170 section rear, whereas on my bikes of late I've been used to 190 rear sections, which is obviously quite a bit wider. Yeah, it really is quite a bit more stable in corners, just tracks really nicely. I would say probably more suitable for touring than the way the GT is. I think the GT is just tuned to be a little bit sportier perhaps, or set up to be a bit sportier. Hard to say exactly what it is. I guess the wheel sizes and the tyre sizes are one aspect, perhaps the geometry. Perhaps the fueling of this has just been improved slightly on the newer model. I'd have to take a newer GT out to do a direct comparison. Yeah, really nice. And it doesn't feel like a super big bike. It doesn't feel particularly, although the riding position is slightly different, it doesn't feel hugely bigger than the GT. I mean, the GT's I would describe perhaps as a mid-sized bike. You know, if you compare it to smaller bikes like, I don't know, say the Street Triple, which I've had before, and then compare it to a larger bike like a GS Adventure, that sort of thing. Even the new Honda Africa Twin is a big old bike. So there's somewhere, I'd always describe this as somewhere in the middle. When you stand next to it and look at it, it looks, you know, it has got a big frontal area, which is my first impression when I picked this up. But when you're sitting on it, it doesn't feel that way at all. You can immediately tell on this it'd just be all day comfy, really effortless for long distance touring, and you can see why people buy these and the likes of the GS for that. They're just mile munchers. They're just really really perfect for doing big distances. And the big twin engine, you know, not revving highly but still loads of power, loads of torque. Spot on. like through these bends are on comfort, and I certainly know that if I go around these bends on the GT in comfort mode, I get quite a bit of wobble as it goes around, as it tracks around. Some of the bumps, particularly on the last corner in this set of bends where there's a lot of rutting in the road. Not getting anything of the sort on this. The last corner will be the real test. You can probably see that being picked up on the screen. Not too bad at all though. No, a lot more composed. I'd say on the GT you have to ride it as if, you know, really to the book, let's say. You know, you really have to make sure it's totally unforgiving if you come off the power partway round the bend, or you know, if you're not off the brakes early enough to settle it, it really gets unsettled around the corner. Whereas this is a little bit more forgiving, I would say. And that's how I felt the suspension to be on the BMs as well. It's just that bit more forgiving. Whereas the GT, you can really unsettle it quite easily in the bends. Certainly that's my experience of the 16-17 model year version. Whether that's changed on the newer one again, I don't know. So this is the way I rode to the dealer this morning on the GT. And it's a pretty bumpy road, lots of little small bumps. I still know they're there, but this is quite a bit more comfortable. Wouldn't say floating over, but not too bad at all. So I'll just put up here. I'm gonna have a little look around it. 1290 Super Adventure S. So you can see there's a lot of similarity with the GT. As I said, it's got the Brembos on the front and rear. Obviously got the smaller section rear compared to the GT. I think that's probably the same as the GS actually. I think 170, 19-inch front. Got a bit of protection there on the front cylinder, which the GT doesn't have. A little bit of a, don't know whether it's a bash plate or whether it's just plastic, but giving it a bit of weather protection nonetheless. LED indicators. As you can see from the front, it's got quite a big frontal section, so your wind protection around your legs is pretty good. I don't know if the handguards come as standard, but they're pretty effective. I've got those on as an accessory on my GT. So the way the pannier mounts in here, not totally invisible like the GT, which is moulded into that rear section, but still nothing really untoward. Centre stand on this bike. Yeah, I mean it's got those kind of adventure looks. So aimed at slightly different. Well, I don't know whether it's you'd say clientele or slightly different segment of the market perhaps. It's got quite a strange bunch of pipes sticking down here. I don't know what for, but the screen is absolutely clear as anything. And as I say, the low speed manoeuvring on it's really excellent. Really easy. Just very nicely balanced and quite easy to ride for the size that it is, frankly. So 6th gear on the GT almost seems a bit high, and it's a bit lumpy when you accelerate from sort of motorway speeds. I would say I think this engine is just ever so slightly smoother. I think the fueling is just slightly better. I don't actually think the gear ratio is any different. But I think either the fueling or perhaps the fluid, as I mentioned earlier, maybe makes that difference there. Certainly the 6th gear seems a bit more useful at UK speeds. So coming back up to gear 4, and I suppose the question is, if they were to say, we've crashed your GT, do you want to keep this? Would I keep it? Yeah, I think I would. I quite like it. It's not a starter bike I've ever ridden before, actually, with this size of wheels. The bars are a bit higher, but the rest of the bike isn't particularly noticeably larger than the GT, or vastly different, I wouldn't say, even though this is a, you know, marketed as an adventure bike. Yeah, I really like it. It's not a world apart from the GT, but the little differences are things that I do like. The upgrade of the screen and the cruise control obviously fix little niggles with the GT, which are not things that in itself that would make me change the bike, but you know, little annoyances really, little things that could be better, and now on the newer models are. Am I going to pay to change it? No. Would I choose this over a GS? That's a very difficult one, particularly over the new model, which also has the lovely screen, and I think the GS is probably still a little bit more refined. This is probably a little bit more powerful, but it is a bit more powerful. Noticeably so in the real world? Not really. Not really. I wouldn't choose the GS over this on power. Probably, or perhaps on refinement. That's a very tough call, and one that at the moment I don't have to make. So here we are.